In 1970, Malaysia was poorer than Ghana. Today, its economy is bigger than Portugal's, Greece's, and New Zealand's combined size wouldn't even come close. How does a country full of tropical jungles, hundreds of islands, and a history of colonization, unrest, and ethnic tension turn into one of the fastest growing economies in Asia? Why are German chipmakers, American data companies, and Chinese investors pouring billions into factories in Kuala Lumpur and Penang? And why does almost nobody talk about this? Even though Malaysia now exports more semiconductors than most European countries combined, there's a story behind this growth that has nothing to do with luck. It comes down to geography, a bold political gamble, and a decision 30 years ago that nearly failed. By the end of this video, you'll find out about the one decision that could have destroyed Malaysia's entire future, and why it almost did. Keep watching, because this story is bigger than you think. Malaysia sits on one of the most important spots on Earth, the Strait of Malacca. Roughly a quarter of all global trade passes through this narrow strait, more oil than through the Suez Canal. Whoever controls this passage controls a piece of the global economy. Singapore sits at one end, but Malaysia wraps around the entire strait, with ports like Port Klang and Penang benefiting for decades from transit trade. On top of that, the country has a unique position outside the typhoon belt with a stable tropical climate, rich soil for palm oil and rubber, and huge reserves of tin, gas, and oil. But raw resources alone don't explain a miracle. Plenty of countries with the same location stayed poor. The difference lies in what Malaysia did next. In the 1970s, the Malaysian government made a radical decision. They didn't just want to sell raw materials. They wanted to start producing things themselves. Under the new economic policy, the government invested heavily in education, infrastructure, and industrialization. Free trade zones were set up in Penang, specifically designed to attract foreign companies with tax breaks and cheap, skilled labor. American tech companies like Intel and AMD were already building factories here back in the 1970s. That wasn't a coincidence. Malaysia offered something rare: political stability, English as an administrative language thanks to its British colonial past, and a fast-growing, young workforce. By the 1990s, Malaysia was no longer just a producer of rubber and tin. It had become one of the world's largest exporters of electronics and semiconductors. Today, Malaysia's economy runs on three pillars. The first is semiconductors. Penang is now known as the Silicon Valley of the East. Companies like Infineon, Bosch, and Micron have invested billions here, especially now that Western countries want to diversify chip production away from Taiwan and China. The second pillar is palm oil. Together with Indonesia, Malaysia produces more than 80% of the world's palm oil. Despite international criticism over deforestation, this remains a multi-billion-dollar industry that generates jobs and export revenue. The third pillar is foreign capital. Thanks to a stable currency, low corporate taxes, and a strategic location between China and India, foreign investment keeps flowing in. Singaporean companies are moving factories to Johor. Chinese companies are building data centers near Kuala Lumpur to get around American trade restrictions. Without most people realizing it, Malaysia has become one of the most important links in the global supply chain. What sets Malaysia apart from many other developing countries is long-term planning. While other nations stay dependent on a single resource, Malaysia deliberately built a diversified economy. Industry, technology, tourism, agriculture, and financial services side by side. The government invested tens of billions in highways, ports, and the Kuala Lumpur metro system. Education was massively expanded with a focus on engineering and English to stay attractive to international companies. The result, a country that transformed in 50 years from agricultural colony to an economy with an average income per capita towering above most of its neighbors. It looks like a success story with no cracks, but it isn't. Behind the growth numbers is a story that's rarely told. The ethnic tensions between Malay, Chinese Malaysian, and Indian Malaysian communities never fully disappeared. The policy designed to economically favor ethnic Malays drove growth, but it also caused years of resentment and even led to a capital flight of Chinese entrepreneurs to Singapore. And then there's a number almost nobody mentions. Malaysia nearly didn't get the success story at all. Growth also opened the door to something darker: corruption on a massive scale. In 2015, investigators uncovered that billions of dollars had vanished from a state investment fund called 1MDB, set up to fund development projects. The money didn't build roads or hospitals. Instead, it allegedly financed luxury real estate, a super yacht, and even a Hollywood movie, with the scandal reaching all the way to the Prime Minister's office. The fallout was massive. A government collapsed, a former Prime Minister was sent to prison, and banks around the world paid billions in fines. It was a stark reminder that behind the glossy growth statistics, Malaysia's institutions were far from perfect. And then there's a number almost nobody mentions. Malaysia nearly didn't get the success story at all. In 1997, during the Asian financial crisis, the Malaysian currency collapsed. Within months, the ringgit lost almost half its value. Foreign investors pulled their money out en masse. The IMF stood ready with a bailout plan, with its usual strict conditions. But Malaysia did something that was seen as economic madness at the time. It refused IMF help. Instead, the government pegged the currency to the dollar and imposed capital controls. Against the advice of nearly every Western economist, it worked. Within 2 years, the economy recovered faster than neighboring countries that did accept IMF aid. That one lonely decision didn't just save the economy. It laid the foundation for the confident, independent growth model Malaysia still uses today. So Malaysia's growth is no accident. It's the result of geography, nerve, and a choice the country made against all odds. A country willing to take a gamble when everyone told them not to, and willing to face its own corruption instead of sweeping it under the rug. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think? Should Malaysia take that 1997 gamble again if it happened today? Do you think the country has really left the 1MDB scandal behind? Or is history bound to repeat itself? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and some of the best insights on this channel come straight from you. If you enjoyed this story about geography, economy, and history, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel grow. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Atlas Ora, because there are many more countries with stories just as surprising as this one, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.